We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest is Richard Tarpey. He's a professor at MTSU, and we're talking supply chain issues with him. We touched bases on how this really affects specific products like baby formula.
Right.
Laid it out there, which really affects an awful lot of people. I mean, consumer demand, as you said, for whatever reason, despite prices, has been up. But you think the latest indicators are there. Maybe it's peaking. Does that mean it's about to start going down a bit?
That's what the prediction is.
Okay.
So when we look at some of the retailers who have been reporting earnings, we talked about Kohl's, their sales are not up anymore. So interestingly, over the last 3 quarters, sales had continually been going up.
Yeah.
Well, now we're noticing that sales are not going up. I think Walmart reported sales were flat, not up.
Okay.
So that hopefully is an indicator that demand is peaking. Because at the end of the day, until demand starts going down, prices aren't going to come down. We can't produce anymore. I think everybody's about producing at close to 100% capacity. There's not much left to go to produce more. Even if we could produce more, we don't have the labor to produce more. So even if we had the mechanical capacity, we don't have the labor capacity to produce more than what we're currently producing in this country. Or for that instance, China or overseas.
Yeah.
They're producing at top rate.
The leveling off, do you think that has something to do with the interest rates slowly going back up? I mean, I know that's with regard to large purchases, but the idea of that is higher interest rates means people are borrowing less and spending less.
Yeah, and that'll be a big help if when it hits the housing industry. Now, everybody says that's a bad thing. Of course, you know, when your housing value drops, that's a bad thing. But as we've been building houses, that's still a lot of demand for lumber, a lot of materials. So as interest rates go up, you're going to see less building of houses, less commercial building. So that'll also taper demand down for a lot of supplies. But then you have new issues, right?
Oh, yeah.
As demand for building goes down, then you have labor that don't have jobs. You know, so it's always and we've known this for years and years and years. It's always a cyclical cycle, right? We go up, we go down, we go up, and we go down. It looks like housing's hitting the peak.
Yep.
Right. So now the question becomes, for the Fed and our policy gurus, how do I not mess this up to put us into a recession? Right, so we hit the brakes. You always hear on the media, and you see reading the Wall Street Journal, they're tapping the brakes, right? Tapping the brakes. Well, they've raised rates. They're going to raise rates again. And the question becomes, how high do you raise the rates before you start over-constricting demand?
And the definition of recession then would be when?
Recession, that's an interesting question. There's multiple definitions of recession. So recession is when your unemployment rate hits a certain level and your consumer consumption rate hits a certain level, right? So that varies, but basically it's when we have unemployment rate going up and we have prices going down and we have high interest rates.
Okay, makes sense. But I'll tell you, as it stands right now, and what you hear and you see day in, day out is that, and you even mentioned it with trucking industry as a good example, is people are hiring.
Yeah.
Still, I mean, there are a lot of jobs out there. Now, obviously, if demand starts coming down, some of these employers may say, well, I don't need 2 more staffers now because I'm not seeing the customers I was.
Right.
But I mean, let's face it, right now, I mean, if you're looking for a job, you should be able to find one. Now, there are plenty of people out there saying they're applying, and for whatever reason, they're not hearing back or getting hired, and they're trying to. But there are help wanted signs, and there are a lot of employers looking to hire right now, and that, you know, if people need jobs, they should be able to find them.
They should. Now that starts a new trend, however, that we haven't touched on. And I just talked to a local company here recently, as last week, of they're automating their warehouse. They're looking to remove 400, or they're looking to remove 50 positions out of 450 long term for automation because they're having such trouble hiring. If I can't rely on hiring and getting labor in, and that's going to impact my operations, I'm going to automate everything I can. And I had participated on a study earlier this year that looked at, if you look at the earnings calls for companies, look at the transcripts, and count the number of times companies have talked about automation. That's up 70% this year. As companies start talking about automation, anything they can do to automate and be less dependent on human labor, which in the long term is going to cause new problems if everybody automates.
I know, and I think that's the direction. It's so interesting you say that. I was just theorizing, because I don't know if you've noticed of late a lot of times, and I don't get angry at all, but when you go through a fast food restaurant now, drive-through, there's a little bit of a wait, and there's quite a line, and it's because the poor workers inside are maybe 2 or 3 of them, and they work very hard. So I always get up and I'm very nice about it, even though I've waited maybe 10 minutes for my burger. I can see the days coming where we are going to have a fully automated fast food restaurant like McDonald's. They're going to get it together, and they're going to have a system where the burgers are made and a computer that'll get the special order, and it'll shuffle on out, and maybe one person operating everything.
Surprised they haven't done it already.
It's coming. It's coming. It's like, think about it in the TV news business. As you and I are sitting here right now, we've got 4 cameras in here, all controlled out there,
Yeah,
not
that's true.
by individual camera people,
You're
which
right.
we used to have. When I first started in this business, we had camera persons on all of them. Right
Yeah.
now, Mary Elena runs the show back there with the control. That's the way it's going to go, and you're right. That's good and bad, I think.
It's good and bad.
And some fronts. Let's take a call from Taylor. Taylor, good morning. Hi, Taylor.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey.
Good morning to you, Professor.
Good morning.
I want to speak on this subject. Of course, the professor knows a whole lot more about it than I do. But now, speaking specifically about this formula shortage, what has not been mentioned this morning is what took place starting in September of last year and continuing up until a month or so ago, is the whistleblower report that came into the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, concerning what was going on in this Abbott lab. Abbott is, as he says, one of 4, but the main one, my understanding is they're about 40% of the U.S. market, even though it might only be 20% in Tennessee. But this whistleblower report had very damning information concerning the production that had slipped and gotten so bad in this Abbott lab, or manufacturing plant. That was in September. In October, the FDA did a quick look at it and disregarded it, sadly. Then there were some poisoned children that took place, so they decided that it was from this manufacturing plant that was the problem. And in February, the plant was shut down, and ever since then, there has been constant delays between the FDA approving the changes and Abbott willing to make the changes. So it's not so much about packages or trucking costs. It's about a foolish problem that took far too long to solve and get that plant going again between both the FDA and the plant themselves. And this will, more of it come out later, but it's a puss on both of them's face as to how this shortage became so severe. And I'm not, I'm surprised that the stores had not started screaming much sooner how low the inventory was going. So this problem between government and manufacturing can be a real problem, just like it is with a lot of the generic drugs that are being taken off the market because of the way
Taylor,
that's my point.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because I wonder if what Taylor's referring to, and thanks for that call, has been highlighted, that this was good. This is something that, for whatever reason, has been going on for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, not just with Abbott, but maybe other companies and the FDA interaction, and it really has been exposed because of what's happened now with everything else, and all of a sudden you realize we've got the shortage. Why? Well, this is a big part of it, and I don't know, is it communication? The federal regulators, we know the FDA can be traditionally just a real pain to get through, anything new with. They're very slow.
Yeah.
They're slow, sometimes with good reason. Sometimes I wonder what's taking so long.
Well, in the FDA, like every other government,
It's a big bureaucracy.
it's a
Red
bureaucracy,
tape
so there's a lot of red tape. It's also underfunded. I know some of the viewers will probably dispute that, but there's not enough FDA representatives to go to every factory, check everything, right? We do sampling, we do these type of things. Now, as far as the whistleblower, Taylor brings up a great point. My personal opinion, this is just my personal opinion, is we're at the point in our society where everybody, and when I say everybody, I don't mean people, companies, government, everybody's overly cautious, right? Nobody wants to just jump in, start accusing, doing this, doing that. So we had a whistleblower event. We hear about whistleblower events pretty regularly now, right? Something's going wrong in this factory or this production line, whatever the case may be. Companies don't respond right away because they want to internally investigate.
Yeah.
Government doesn't get involved right away because they want to be sure they have everything before they start accusing somebody. Because if I accuse somebody wrongly, I'm going to get sued, right? I'm going to have to pay a bunch of money. So everybody's very cautious. Now, when it turns into the food supply, it becomes critical, right? Well, I didn't look at this for 3 months. There might be something in the formula that might hurt some infants. So it becomes a big issue when it is in the food supply, obviously. But this goes back to whenever one of the pain relievers had the issue with cyanide way back. Remember that in the 70s? I think it was 70s or early 80s. We heard all these same things. You know, how come that company wasn't checking things? How come the government was in there checking something? So I think it's a little bit of, we move forward with caution these days to try to get it right. Sometimes caution causes a problem when it's a critical product. So I think, as Taylor said, we're going to find out more about this as time goes on, as more information comes out about what was known, what wasn't known. But let's be realistic. Most companies aren't out to harm consumers. That would be bad for their business. Right? Now, maybe they acted too slowly. That could very well be. We'll find out. And I'm sure they'll put some processes in place, quality control, to try to prevent that. But
you know, as we wrap things up with you this morning, just for our viewers, you talked about how maybe consumer demand is leveling off. We know about the interest rates. We see some improvements, steps maybe being taken to try to address the baby formula issue. So moving forward, we'll probably have you sitting next to me again in a month or so, and we can look back. Things maybe have improved over the past month. For the average consumer, though, in the short term here now, do we expect we're going to see gas prices maybe still go up a bit more? Same thing with the basics, your potato chips, your meats, your vegetables, especially anything fresh will be expensive. What do you think?
Nothing's coming down in price anytime soon. So it may go up a little more, it may stay level. As long as the war is going on, gas prices aren't going anywhere. The war being Russia and Ukraine, right? As long as Russian oil is out of the market, the supplies are going to be low. Unless OPEC changes their direction, I don't see that happening.
It's interesting how when these things happen, and we talked about this last time you were on, it benefits certain businesses, as you said. As things get more expensive now, some of the discount retailers are going to all of a sudden see a boost in their sales.
Have already.
They have.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're talking about places like Aldi, right? Some of the other, I don't know how Dollar General's doing.
Big Lots, Dollar General.
Big Lots. It's just, and people may be going more toward generic. Is that how it goes?
You know, it actually is. During the spring, there wasn't a lot of that. You know, when they talk to, there's a lot of interviews out in the media of corporate executives, but a lot of the executives in the spring were talking about, well, we're not seeing a lot of consumers going away from our name brands. Now you're starting to see that, right? When you start looking at the big name brands like Palmolive and all those, their sales are starting to go down. Right? Now people are the generic sales are starting to go up. So it took a long time this time for people to switch to those generics.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, don't you think people maybe in their own mind have a threshold in their head where they'll decide that's just more than I'm willing to pay right now. For I'd said as an example, and I love a steak. I like beef, and I will have it. I do not buy steaks anymore right now. Beef steaks. I mean, I'll buy some pork chops every once in a while. I'd still buy chicken even though they're all up. But beef, for whatever reason, is way up here. And as much as I like it, my threshold for paying for beef, it's been met. And I'm going elsewhere.
But you just hit on one of the critical and hardest parts of the supply chain, pricing. Right, so every company looks at their pricing. They've got people paid a lot of money, a lot smarter than me, to figure out pricing. And that pricing equation is, what's the threshold where people will stop paying it and go to something else?
I think mine was kind of high for beef, but it's still up there because at some point they have to adjust it and maybe make less profit. I don't know. Professor, as always, this is a pleasure having you on this morning, and we'll talk again. It's just, I learn something every time you come on. I really do. And it can be confusing and a little frustrating, but hey, this is, as you said, It's up and down. It's not like this is the first time this has ever happened.
Nope.
Appreciate you coming on. We'll see you again soon, all right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right,
Thank
Professor Tarpey from MTSU. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we did end a segment early. And you're like, wait, Dick, the show's not over. Okay, Miss Cheap's coming on, which is a handy thing coming on after the fact to talk about something very important to her. Stay tuned. We'll be back wrapping up the show with her right after this.